Radio Chickadee Oobulus. You'll find them live here on Fridays from 2:30 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Date Time. Check out their website at Southern Sense, as in commonsense.net. It's that easy, southernsense.net. So sit back and relax. They're informative, fun, irreverent, and politically incorrect. You never know where they'll go, but you'll love the journey.
For those who are joining us for the first time, we start each and every show with a dedication to fallen heroes. Today, we honor the brave men and women who changed history and gave birth to the new experiment of these United States of America. This republic has now existed longer than any previous republic created in history. These courageous men, as they set the revolution in motion, pledged their fortunes and their very lives. Some fell in battle. Many found themselves imprisoned and were their wives and children. Others found their homes destroyed and their families forever lost. And some melted away, never to be heard again. These men did not fight alone. Wives and some children marched with them into battle. Sons fought alongside. Some ran messages or marched as fife and drum corps. Wives tended to the wounded and feed the troops. And some, when their husbands fell in battle, took up his arms, be it a rifle or a cannon. We dedicate this show to each of them. Some we may never know their names, but we owe our very liberty, freedom, and God-given rights to them. Because of their sacrifice and courage, they laid the foundation that led to the abolition of slavery, the recognition of their citizenship, the guaranteeing of their right to vote, as well for women and persons of the age of 18 and above. They laid the foundation that brought forth this nation and its continued march to an even greater republic that Benjamin Franklin said is predicated upon each of our effort to keep it.
In Lexington, the first volley of muskets. In Concord, an order to fire and the shot heard round the world. And months later, Patriots and Redcoats clash in Charlestown, the first major battle heralding the war.
The battle fought here was very much like a European-style set-piece battle.
But before the American Revolution came years of outrage and unrest over taxes by the crown without representation for the colonies. Propaganda ruled the day and inspired action. In 1765 in Virginia, a resolution passed declaring the British Stamp Act illegal. In Boston, the Sons of Liberty were born, led in part by Samuel Adams, and violent clashes escalated. By 1770, the Boston Massacre, 5 colonists killed by British troops.
We believe it was right here, basically in the middle of this very busy intersection. And yes, it was the first time that representatives of the king had killed colonists.
Daniel Hall, nicknamed the Cradle of Liberty, was a nexus for meetings and protests.
By 1772, we were riding through the committees of correspondence, and then not too far after that was when we had the meetings in Philadelphia that really, the Continental Congress, that really started to coordinate across the different colonies.
That same year, colonists in Rhode Island destroyed a British customs ship. Then, back in Massachusetts, huzzah! The Boston Tea Party. Patriots, furious over attacks on tea, further turned the tide toward independence.
Once that tea touches land, we have to pay the tax.
This is one of 3 vessels here this night.
It took 3 to 3.5 hours to destroy 340 chests of the East India Company tea.
Word got back to London and the punishment was fierce.
They closed Boston Harbor and 40 miles of coastline surrounding. That was meant as a chokehold on Boston.
In 1774, women began to organize in North Carolina, boycotting taxed goods. In New Hampshire, one of the first armed acts of rebellion, a raid on a British fort. And the following year, Paul Revere's midnight ride warned the British were coming. Full conflict exploded, but even in defeat, the Patriots proved they would not relent.
The army stayed intact. It stayed intact in order to fight another day.
This would be war.
Marking America 250, I'm Erica Tarantel in the birthplace of the American Revolution, Boston, Massachusetts.
History remembers this moment, where the Declaration lay before Congress.
Even though the truth is this scene never existed.
You speak of order, but I see only oppression. How dare you? We speak for the people! Then listen, we demand representation now!
After Lexington and Concord, Patriots had taken up arms, but had no unified voice to speak for them.
Gentlemen, we must find a consensus before the vote.
So Congress formed a Continental Army.
That is the general from Virginia.
The only man impractical enough to wear a uniform to a political meeting.
But even with an army, we had not yet decided what exactly we were fighting for. We petitioned the king for peace. He answered by calling us traitors.
For as in absolute governments the king is law, so in free countries the law ought to be king, and there ought to be no other.
We do accordingly strictly charge and command all our officers, as well civil as military, and all other our obedient and loyal subjects to use their utmost endeavours to withstand and suppress such rebellion, and to disclose and make known all treasons and traitorous conspiracies.
Nothing speeds independence like being threatened with a good hanging.
The odds are not in our favor.
Perhaps, but our cause is just.
The war widened, old hopes thinned, and the question was no longer whether we would separate, but when. They asked me to draft the Declaration, and in that cramped room, I began the work of defining a people's right to be free.
The heat, the flies, the secrecy, liberty does not begin in comfort. Clarity is its own kind of poetry.
Line by line, we carved the case for separation. Every charge weighed. Every word contested.
Before it is too late.
By July, the question came to a vote.
That night, despite his illness and the malady that consumed him, Rodney abandoned his convalescence to ride 80 miles to break the tide vote.
12 colonies voted for independence.
Maryland, aye.
1 abstained.
Virginia, aye.
The deed was done, not with cheers, but with a trembling. On the 4th, the Declaration was approved. And on the 8th, it was read aloud to the people.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created and declare that these colonies are, and of right ought to be free and independent.
Fine words, but words alone would not secure liberty. That task belonged to the men standing barefoot in the dirt.
We set our names upon that parchment, knowing the cost, and believing the world would be better for it.
We must all hang together, or most assuredly, we shall all hang separately.
Are live. Oh man, you all ready for 4th of July?
I am, yes. I think it'll be fun this year. And we have the, all the events going on in DC. So that'll be cool to see.
All right. So our listeners know I've got Sam Dorman here. He's the legal expert over at the Epoch Times. And boy, do we have a lot of doo-doo to step into today. Well, by the way, my mom turns 94 on July 4th. And you think about that, she has lived to see more than one-third of this nation's history.
Wow, that is so cool.
What a
Tell her
day
happy
to celebrate. Yeah.
birthday.
All right. Well, I don't know where do we start? Geez, you had the Supreme Court ruling, and this is what really confused me. They said Trump couldn't fire Lisa Cook because he didn't have, I don't know, a just cause or reasonable to do that, but yet they give him the right to fire other federal workers. I'm confused here. Didn't she have a problem with a phony mortgage or something like that?
Well, that was the allegation. Yeah. So, I mean, basically, Trump based it on the a referral, I think, from his his housing authority, basically saying that she had committed fraud and that she wasn't suitable for a financial position because of that. But Lisa Cook has denied wrongdoing, and she obviously fought back against this firing. And the main issue, I guess, the main difference between the FTC, which is the other case you're talking about, and the Federal Reserve is that the Federal Reserve, in the court size, they view it as more independent, and it also is not quite the same type of agency that the court has ruled on in the past in the same way. So a big issue in this case was this precedent known as Humphrey's Executor, which was a similar case to what Trump was dealing with, which was FDR had tried to fire a Federal Trade Commissioner. And the Supreme Court basically said, with these independent agencies, so-called independent agencies like the FTC and NLRB, but they're focused on the FTC in this case, they exercise something known as quasi-judicial and quasi-legislative power. Now, what exactly those are is not really clear, but they were kind of saying, this was in 1935, the Supreme Court was kind of saying that basically these agencies were acting as almost like an arm or extension of Congress. And so Congress was able to put more protections on their position and sort of limit the ways that the president could fire them. And so Trump was disagreeing with this and said, this all goes back to the FTC Act, which is the law that basically restricted the president's ability to fire these people. And Trump was saying, this precedent is bad, but also just that Article 2, which is the part of the Constitution that lays out executive authority, gives me power over the executive branch. And so that's why, that particular precedent was applying to independent agencies rather than the Federal Reserve, which is pretty different. It's a bank separate from the executive branch. And so that's why the justices, they had a different set of cases to work with, but they also thought that the Federal Reserve was, I think, more independent or should be more independent.
Because I was reading some of the articles and the decisions on it, saying that because he was going after Lisa Cook, he could affect the economy.
Yeah,
that's strange, That's a reason.
Well, I think that kind of goes into their arguments about independence, which is that the Federal Reserve needs to be perceived as more independent potentially than the FTC and other agencies because of how they set monetary policy and how much they can impact the economy. And it's kind of I feel like that might be a reason why some people think that they shouldn't be so independent, right? It's like, because they're making all these decisions independent of a politically, a branch that was elected by the people. So that's been kind of complicated, but it's that also came up during oral argument where Justice Barrett was saying, what should we do with these people saying that if we grant the president's request to to allow the firing, then we'll be causing disruption in the economic markets. And that's because this case was a little bit different than other cases in that it came on the emergency docket. So they had to consider a bunch of different factors instead of just deciding whether or not, the firing was just or was proper.
Well, there's also one thing that really confused me about this, was when she filed her lawsuit, she said she was being denied her property. Now, if we remember, the Constitution says you have the right to be secure in your person's papers and property. So she was claiming that her job was her property. And I don't claim that because it's a position that you are employed at. It's not something tangible that you can hold and walk away with.
Yeah, I think it was That's a little bit of a complicated issue, because I think Justice Thomas was, he penned a dissent where he was basically saying the same thing, because that's how the lower court ruled. They say, Lisa Cook has a property interest under the Fifth Amendment. Now, what Roberts did, though, is his ruling was, I think, a little bit narrower. Just from like my first look at it, it seemed like what he was saying is, he's not resolving in this decision, at least, he's not saying specifically whether or not she has some kind of like Fifth Amendment right to property within this position. What he was more saying is like that she deserves some kind of notice and opportunity to be heard, not even necessarily in a court of law, but just that there has to be some kind of due process, like some kind of notice, like Trump has to provide an opportunity for her to challenge her firing. Trump hadn't done what was required in that sense. And so, yeah, I think that issue is still up in play, just based on my cursory reading of Justice Roberts' opinion in that decision. So, yeah, it is. I think most people have your intuition, though. But that's not a property. It's not your property.
Well, the other person, I forgot her name now, besides Cook, the other one that was suing for her job back. I'm sorry, break part here.
Rebecca Slaughter. Yeah.
Slaughter. Yes, Slaughter. I love that name, Slaughter. Now, I was also confused on that, because in one case, they said that the executive branch doesn't have control over the people that they appoint, the appointments under his jurisdiction. And yet in the second case with Slaughter, they said he does. So
Well,
the Federal Reserve supposed to be independent of his powers. So who has the powers over the Federal Reserve?
Yeah, I feel like that's what everyone asks, right? This is really raising that question, like, what does Fed independence mean? Like, is there any kind of democratic check on the Fed? And but basically, I mean, to answer your question, so it wasn't so much about like Trump's authority over these people. I mean, in a sense, it was more about just what Congress had said about the ways that he could fire these people. So Congress has passed laws for these independent agencies saying, you can't fire these people unless you have like, unless they've committed negligence or wrongdoing or these other types of causes. And there's a similar law for the Federal Reserve. But the way that the court has ruled on this in the past, they've said that particularly for the independent agencies like the FTC, which is they consider to be different than the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is kind of like a bank in its own kind of universe, basically, where the FTC and these other agencies are directly underneath the president. And so that's why the court thinks that Congress should not be able to limit the president's ability to fire them, especially because they exercise so much quote unquote executive authority. So the FTC can do things like fine people, can bring lawsuits, can investigate and do all these new things. And Justice Roberts, I think, has even said before that the FTC has a lot more power than it used to, at least executive power. And so it doesn't quite meet that definition of quasi-judicial or quasi-legislative power, which is like, they're doing things that are sort of more in line with what Congress or the courts would do. I don't know if I answered. I'm sorry, it's kind of complicated.
Yeah, because they're hitting us with one decision after another, and it was like rapid fire all day yesterday. I mean, my head was spinning after a while. I don't know about yours.
Yes, it was, for sure. It's still spinning.
So now, they also made a ruling on campaign finance reform. Now, I'm harkening back to a number of years ago where we had a win because they said corporations are not individuals entitled to the same form of free speech as an individual, so that an individual can donate whatever they want, but corporations are now restricted. And now here we have them recognizing a political party is the same as having free speech of an individual, as I'm reading it. Am I looking at this wrong, or am I looking at this correct? If we're looking at it correctly, Graham Platinum's got a big problem.
I think it's close. Basically, yeah, it's really about these. I think it's basically in line sort of with what the Supreme Court has been doing, which is saying that the First Amendment protects donations and political contributions in recent years. And this case was interesting because it was more about not so much direct contributions to campaigns, but whether or not the political parties could like have these coordinated efforts with campaigns where, they would maybe consult with them, run an ad for a particular candidate, something, things like that. And so it's also interesting because this was a case that, or this was a law. So it's the Federal Election, I think it's Federal Election and Conventions Act, something like it's FECA, basically. That's the acronym. And that law had these provisions, and the Supreme Court had upheld these provisions before, I think in 2001. But yesterday's decision, when the Supreme Court ruled, they said that they were overruling that decision. And basically, they said that, the First Amendment it protects generally kind of like a wide array of things that people can do in terms of giving their money to candidates or giving their money to parties. And so they kind of acknowledge that there is some room for Congress to regulate that right or that interest, because like quid pro quo corruption, like someone gives money to a campaign that influences a candidate, and the candidate gives the money back or gives something back to the person who donated. So they said there's some room for like regulating speech or donations for the purposes of regulating corruption, but this in particular, they thought that the court had, or sorry, that the law had gone too far. That it was just basically like it was throwing all these different measures, like there was way too many things basically designed to prevent corruption. And when you get to that level, there's this thing called heightened scrutiny within court decisions, which is basically like your particular effort at stopping a bad activity has to be narrowly tailored, and you can't just throw a bunch of stuff at it, because of these First Amendment protections.
Well, how does this affect PACs? Does it affect them at all, or is they just business as usual?
Does it affect PACs? I'm not sure actually. I think that this is mainly about. Yeah, I need to look at that. The way I know that the decision itself is focused on political parties, and so like the NRC and JD Vance had sued. They had brought this suit initially. Yeah. So I think it would depend on like how PACs, how they contribute to parties and things like that. Yeah, I think that's if donors are using, for example, PACs as like a go-between, I think that's kind of where that comes in.
Well, just on a side note, because we recently here in South Carolina had our state convention, and one of the things we did was pass a amendment to our rules, where that we are looking to close the primaries because South Carolina has open primaries. But what's the point of a primary if your party has no control over who the candidate is? If you have someone crossing over and influencing your party, then that's not a party. It's like telling you that you're a girl who enters the Eagle Scouts, but you never went through the Brownies or the Boy Scouts and made your way up. You didn't follow the rules. So we placed in rules stating that you had to vote in so many elections prior, and showing that you did vote as a Republican. You had to have other things in place. That's just to run as a candidate. And then as to be a member, it also had a set rule. So you can transfer your Republican membership from state to state. However, you suddenly say, we know for a fact you voted for Joe Biden a week ago. You cannot declare yourself a Republican, basically. So we're narrowly tailoring it so that only Republicans are in the Republican Party, which is, I always said, if New York State could do this, and I started voting first presidential election, Ronald Reagan. So if New York State could do this all the way back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, why can't we do that here in South Carolina in the 2000s? It made no sense. So they're bringing suit this coming week in federal court to close the primaries. So I think that the nation's starting to wake up to the difference in the political parties, especially what's going in the Democratic Party. And I think the people are starting to say, no, wait a minute, you're not really a Democrat, you're a socialist. You're not really a Democrat, you're a communist. So basically, we're saying the same thing, I think. And how do you feel that we're looking at it? Are we looking at this the right way?
I haven't followed that issue that much, but I know that's come up. I think it even came up in California. And there's like, I mean, this is just like election integrity is just kind of like a nationwide issue now, right? There's a Supreme Court about opinion about this, the mail-in ballots decision, right? Just of like, is there a way to actually track and verify who is submitting a ballot in a particular election? And yeah, I don't know. I think it varies. It probably varies from state to state. And do you know anything about that lawsuit? Like if there were kind of like state constitutional arguments involved in that, or
Okay, they would now amend our state constitution. So this
Mhm.
is the first step to force the legislature to make the move to amend the constitution.
Oh, okay, interesting.
To occur in this election cycle, but in the presidential cycle, that's what we're aiming it for.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So I think a couple of things I stumped you on today.
I'll have to check that out. I think that sounds like a really interesting lawsuit.
Yeah. Now another one everyone's talking about is now this ban on boys and girls sports.
Yes.
But it's not a blanket ban. It's a state issue. And I harken back to when we did Roe v. Wade, and then when they defined marriage, I said, that's a state issue. All right. These are state issues. And the Supreme Court on this one, I think, finally got it right. One of the things I screamed about when the government decided to define marriage is a religious ceremony. A civil union is a government a function. There's two different things. And once they redefine the word marriage as something government affects, they're redefining religion. And the same thing in what you believe spiritually, whether or not a boy is a boy and girls are girls, and you can't change them. I think the Supreme Court finally got this one right.
Yeah, I think this was pretty interesting. I think it was expected, but it was interesting how it turned out because even the liberals, I think, agreed that that West Virginia's law at least did not violate Title IX, which is this law basically saying you can't have sex-based discrimination in educational institutions, and so they agreed with that. But there was some quibbling over the Equal Protection Clause, the 14th Amendment, which is, there basically under the Equal Protection Clause, there's this idea that if a policy classifies people based on sex, then it has to sort of be checked against these different standards. There's something called heightened scrutiny, like I mentioned earlier, where they have to analyze, what's the state's interest here? Like, is the interest justified? Like, is the way that they're trying to achieve that interest justified? And so Justice Kavanaugh, who wrote the majority opinion in this case, he said, yes, it's justified because there's so much concern about, the biological realities that underpin sports and how these girls are, facing safety risk, and then they're also losing out on fairness and competitive efforts. So he said that that this law does classify on the basis of sex, but that it's justified because the state has an interest in segregating sports. So I thought that was really interesting. But I was going to say, I don't know if you read Justice Thomas and Justice Jackson's opinions in that case, but they're really interesting because they got into this question of like, can you redefine a man and a woman, right? And Justice Thomas said it doesn't matter how much this plaintiff thinks that they're a woman or not, like gender identity doesn't matter from the biological facts. And then Justice Jackson was saying, well, how do we know that Title IX referred to biological sex? And how do we know that, like, she was saying that she was using the term like sex assigned at birth and that type of thing.
Yeah, I mean, this is the same woman in a confirmation hearing couldn't define what a woman was.
Right. Well, I thought that was interesting, right? Because she's like, I'm not a biologist. But then I think in the opinion that she wrote, she says that this athlete who's a male identifying or saying that he's a woman, she says that he's living as a girl or that he is a girl. So I'm like, do you know what a woman is? Like, if you can say that this person is a woman or is a female, then it seems like you may have some kind of idea of what that is.
I like the fact they said your biological gender at birth, not assigned or anything like that, but what you are at birth, because you can't change our DNA. So that's something that is planted in you. I found it amazing because they started to throw transgender and stuff into some of their arguments. But there is a physical, as you said, a physical difference. And it's interesting because I had the honor of interviewing Phyllis Schlafly shortly before she passed away. and she's pushing for that equal rights amendment, act or whatever it was. I forget it was all those years ago. And I got into debate with her. It's like, well, how do you define sex? In today's day and age, the word sex is being redefined.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, you made it to your natural born gender. It makes more sense. And as we got through that, she goes, you know what? She actually agreed with me. So this
Oh,
is
really?
with that, the Equal Rights Act that they were trying to pass. I said, in today's day and age, you can see how we are metamorphizing into having you change your sex. And we can't forget the first gender change was back in the 1950s.
I thought she was campaigning against the Equal Rights Amendment, wasn't she? In like this, I can't remember the time frame. Maybe I thought that was her like main push. Was she was trying to get rid of the the feminists pushing the Equal Rights Amendment. And she was saying it would be bad for women.
And when I talked to her about changing that word to gender at birth, that makes sense.
Okay.
It's the same thing I was saying. And I also debated her on the Constitutional Convention.
Interesting.
It was a lot of fun. I got to see if I can find that recording. I mean, it was a long, long time ago. God bless that woman. She did a great thing.
Yeah.
One of the other things, a big thing that's hitting all the news, and we can't walk away from this one, and this is the birthright and how they are reinterpreting the constitutional amendment to say that, if your jurisdiction, simply by being within our borders, makes you under our jurisdiction. But that's not how our founders or the framers of that amendment intended. And they were very specific about using the word jurisdiction.
Yeah, it was interesting to see the divide on this one, because you had 6-3 overall, but in terms of the reasoning, it was more 5-4 in some ways, because Justice Kavanaugh didn't really agree with how the Chief Justice and the other justices were interpreting the 14th Amendment. He tried to make this more about what Congress had said. But yeah, it was an interesting decision, because you had Thomas, who's kind of like, I would say, the foremost originalist on the court, dissenting and saying this was about freed slaves. It was not about he was trying to say, he was opposing this view. I think he was saying that, basically agreeing with the administration, that there has to be some kind of greater allegiance or greater tie to the country, but before you can actually receive citizenship, or your children can. And Justice Roberts was like, I think he had some pretty strongly worded statements. Like, I think that he said that the dissent had a dramatically revisionist view of history. So yeah, it was interesting to look at that. And I mean, now I think that this is kind of like almost like a Roe v. Wade, because it's something that is so firm that, like, because they ruled on the amendment itself rather than just something like from legislation, Congress can't really change this. I mean, I've seen people propose, these ideas like we should have legislation, or we should pass a constitutional amendment. If they could actually get a majority to pass an amendment, then that might work. But you can't, once the majority of the justices have ruled on the amendment, there's nothing you can really do by statute.
No, it's really, because I found in his choice of words also that they're devaluing our citizenship. And you think of that, there's no other nation in the planet, in the world, that turns around and says, if you're born within our borders, you are now automatically a citizen. Nowhere. So why do we have that? Every other nation in the world understands the difference between a subject, a citizen, and someone who just pops the baby out while they're here in the United States. So what do we do now with all these tourism births? What do we do with all these illegal alien births?
Mm-hmm.
And now we already know China has been sending people over, knowing sooner or later we're going to flub on this issue, and we have.
Mm-hmm.
And we have men and women now in China that have never stepped a single foot, never planted a single toe on our land, who can now run for president. And that's a scary thought. They're coming of age now.
Yeah, it's hard to say. Like, I don't know if there's much the administration can do, except for, like they said yesterday, the DOJ said that it was going to start prosecuting birth tourism more heavily. So I guess they're going to, try and look at things like fraud and other issues with the way that people are processed, the way they come to the country for visas, and try to get rid of or prosecute fraud in those sense and clamp down on issues that are involved with that. But yeah, I don't think that there's really much that they can do in terms of like limiting the citizenship once these people get into the country, because the Supreme Court kind of already laid down the rule on that. So yeah, it's hard to say. And I kind of wonder whether or not, I was wondering if Hannah would be on here, because I was kind of wondering if this is necessarily going to lead to some kind of mass amnesty, because you can't deport someone's parents if they're just a baby, right? So like,
Right.
how are they going to deal with, if let's assume there's a bunch more people that come over the border and they have these kids, like how are you going to deal with the parents in that situation?
And what about the chain migration now? Because once they are now recognized as citizens, now everyone else can come over with them. And so now your aunt can bring her husband and her kids, and your second cousin 3 rows down can bring over their family. And I think it's the fastest and easiest way for another country to destroy us from within, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. Yeah, I think this decision in particular is like one of those that has one of the biggest impacts, because you don't know what the composition of the country is going to be in like 50 years, right? And you don't know how people are going to exploit this system. We already know that people have exploited the system. It's just, yeah. So it remains to be seen. I don't know. I don't know what to say. Like, and because I'm also thinking of like, Europe, where they're having this migration crisis and they have all these people there that don't assimilate, and that's really causing a lot of issues there. And we've had some of that already, so it seems like it's going to just be exacerbated.
Yes, it's a huge snowball effect. And they were akin it as such a bad decision as they had with Roe v. Wade, but I think this is worse than Roe v. Wade, honestly.
Okay.
At least it's going down a huge slippery slope. Because you also had the tourism industry out in LA area where they weren't even issuing the origin of the parents. Are they citizens of the United States when the baby is born? Are they legal residents when the baby is born? So they have these kids with birth certificates, and you can't prove that they were here on tourism or illegal. You can't prove the origin of their birth.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's definitely one of the most consequential decisions, because like, yeah, it's going to affect the composition of the country. It'll affect things like census allocations, like it'll affect voting, it'll affect social services, how much these states are able to pay, how much they pay out, how much the federal government pays out for these services. So I think that Justice Roberts said that he didn't really want to consider the policy or practical implications when he was during oral argument, but I think that this might be one of those that has some of the biggest policy implications.
Yeah. I just imagine now someone lives overseas, was born here, but lived their entire life overseas. They turn 65, move to the United States, you got Social Security, you got Medicare, you got Medicaid, you got all the benefits now, and you never once worked a single day here in the United States.
Yeah, I don't know how those formulas work out, to be honest, but yeah, I think it's definitely going to put a strain on the social services system. And these entitlements are already ballooning in the United States, so I don't know how much more they can handle. I think this will create a lot of pressure, though, for Republicans to start doing more on border security and just like generally immigration restrictions. So we might see more of that deters future migration, or maybe like, the administration has also been really big on fraud and program integrity when it comes to social services, so that they could do something like, they could continue doing that and find ways to, I guess, stamp out fraud related to immigration in that way. But yeah, I think it'll be interesting, because I mean, Trump isn't completely giving up. Like, if you look on Truth Social, he said, we don't need an amendment. We can do something through Congress. I'm not really sure what he's referring to there, because like I said, the justices already ruled on the 14th Amendment, which trumps legislation. But yeah, it definitely looks like he's going to try to do something.
Well, another thing I'm sorry Hannah's not with us, but the temporary protection status.
Yes.
That's what we know. and rightly so. You mean, you're supposed to apply for citizenship and residency within a certain time period, but this has been a free ride for some people for decades.
Yeah, it's those are interesting cases because I mean they only looked at Haiti and Syria, right? But there were other cases from the administration because the administration had tried to terminate this status for a bunch of different nationalities, and I don't really. I mean, I think it would be interesting to look at like what the conditions are in some of those countries because apparently the State Department was saying Syria is not safe to return to while they were fighting. While they were trying to maintain the revocation of the temporary protected status. But I think that the interesting thing about the Supreme Court decision is that they said even all of these questions, a lot of these questions at least, belong to the president and to the Department of Homeland Security, and judges do not have the authority to review their determinations on this. So that, I think, right there is just like giving Trump an enormous amount of power to continue revoking these things. And it also indicates that like this, because this has also been a pretty recurring issue of judges, this question of whether or not judges are exceeding their authority and blocking the president. And I think that this really is like an indication the Supreme Court has and is going to continue blocking some of these judges' decisions because of either just the president's authority or because Congress has said, like in this case, the Congress has said there's no judicial review of this particular issue.
Well, now, along that line, they did it completely opposite when they talked about his tariffs. So here they give the power to control immigration with the temporary status, but then they do a complete 180 on the tariffs. Now, I couldn't find a lot of information on this, so forgive me if I'm really ignorant, but what does this actually mean, especially when we're dealing with Iran, China, Russia, and some of the tariffs they placed on it? Where do we stand with that now?
With the tariffs, I mean, so the tariffs are kind of an interesting issue because Trump has said, that he has multiple legal avenues for imposing these tariffs. And he, immediately after the decision, and I think it was in February, he imposed these in a new round of tariffs, which have been challenged in the court. So those are, I think, going to go back up to the Supreme Court. It's under a different law. But, there's still ways for him to impose tariffs on these different countries. It's just more difficult and to do it in sort of a sweeping way that he wanted to. At least this is kind of what the administration is saying, because he was using a law called the International Emergency Powers Act, and it's a pretty broadly phrased law. Like it seems like, and when he invoked this law, he tried to have he did not just the reciprocal tariffs, he did these broad tariffs on trafficking, and then I think there was another set of tariffs, or it was like drug trafficking and things like that. So, it was. I think that the decision definitely limits his ability, or makes it more difficult for him to achieve his goals. But there are still potentially other avenues for him to do this.
Now, I should have included this in a previous part of what we are conversation about Colorado's conversion therapy ban.
Right.
And this is something that parents have been arguing about. This is something that the medical field is finally admitting, that when you try to do this with children, it has extreme consequences for that person's health for the rest of their life. It's one thing to make the decision as an adult, but to allow a child to decide this when they can't smoke, they can't drink, they can't drive, they can't vote, and yet they can make an irrevocable change in their life without being fully informed and fully aware of the consequences.
Yeah. So I think you're talking about, when you talk about the conversion therapy ban, so that one is more about like people that are saying they have gender dysphoria or they have like same-sex attraction, and they're trying to get therapy to sort of like reverse that or deal with it. That's kind of what Colorado was about, although it does kind of like touch on, these issues of whether or not that should be allowed as an alternative to going to a doctor who is going to say you need to take hormones and things like that, right? Because I think the Supreme Court, the Scrimetti decision from last year, the Supreme Court already said states can ban these types of procedures, so-called sex changes or gender affirming care, quote unquote. But this one was kind of interesting. This case with Colorado was a bit interesting because when you're talking about conversion therapy, you're talking about what therapists can actually say, in their own offices. And so there's a question of whether or not, is that actually speech, or is that is that speech protected by the First Amendment, or is that conduct that the state can regulate like it does with medical activity? So I thought it was an interesting question, just because it's a really gray area where you're talking about what can a therapist actually say and what is the effect of what they're saying. The Supreme Court ended up ruling in favor of this therapist, and so yeah, it's an interesting case.
It is, because I had a couple of therapists on. They were from Canada, and if any one of them even tried to do this, the conversion therapy, they would lose their license, and they were so restricted on what they could and could not say to their patients. So when you're trying to speech, isn't that then in violation of the First Amendment?
Yeah. So there was a question though about whether or not this was actually speech, and the type of speech that it was, because there's different precedents within the court's history of how you treat different types of speech, how you treat different types of law that are regulating speech. And so, yeah, the court basically agreed. I think the court said this is the type of speech that needs to have extra protection, is especially insulated from legislative attempts to restrict it. And so that case, though, I think that was a preliminary injunction. So I think it's going to go back to a lower court and it'll keep playing out. But yeah, this has been an issue for other states as well. I know there was a case in, I think, Washington State, but the Supreme Court declined to hear that one. So yeah, I guess there's probably going to be more litigation, but overall, I think that these therapists will come out on top.
Well, along that same vein, there was a case coming out of California about the parents' right to know what's going on with the child in school.
Yeah.
Whether or not the teachers are promoting, transgenderism or whatever it is, that the parents had a right to know. So what was the end result of this? Do we have a right to know what our kids are doing?
Yeah, they ruled in favor of the parents, if I'm remembering correctly. I think there were two. There was a group of teachers and I think a group of parents that brought a lawsuit, and I think that the Supreme Court focused just on the parents' arguments. But it's this idea that it's going back to this decision from last year. It's called Mahmoud v. Taylor, I think, and that, I don't know if you remember it was the storybooks in Maryland, and the question of whether or not these storybooks that contain certain content about sexuality and gender, whether the state could or the county could force kids to participate in this without any kind of opt-out from the parents. And basically what Justice Alito said was that the First Amendment provides protections for parents, and that they have the right to direct the religious upbringing, or direct kind of have authority over their children's beliefs and the influence on their beliefs. And so because of that, Maryland's law or Maryland's acts were kind of running afoul or conflicting with the Constitution. So that was what they cited when they're talking about this California case. And the right to know is a similar principle, where the majority of the court was saying, like we said last year, or in this other case, parents have a certain right to know, or right to certain authority over what their kids are going through and what they're doing, even if the school, it's a public school. The kids have, or that the parents have a right to be involved.
I find that curious because here in South Carolina, any person, if you're paying school taxes, you have the right to go to the school and ask what textbooks that they're using, what are they teaching. They can even sit in and monitor a class. So I find it very strange that, California or any of these other states will say, no, you can't know what's going on in the classroom. Wait a minute, our tax dollars are going into that. So not only just the parental rights, the rights of the taxpayers to know what we're paying for.
Yeah, I think this is all of this is kind of raising questions about the public school system and whether or not it can truly be a neutral forum for ideas and for parents of different beliefs and different students. Because I don't know if you saw the Ten Commandments case coming out of Texas, right, where there is the Fifth Circuit basically said that Texas had the right to require these public schools to display the Ten Commandments in classrooms. And so the arguments in that case are like, it's getting back to this idea of like, is there a sort of excessive entanglement between the state and religion? And so there were courts saying basically, and the Supreme Court is even in 1980, they said that they rejected a similar law from Kentucky, basically requiring these, the 10 Commandments to be posted. So, yeah, so there's a question in that case, I think of just like, you know, is requiring the 10 Commandments, is that forcing your religion on someone, or is it like, is it a good thing to have? If it is a good thing to have, is that somehow like violating or coercing people into, yeah, accepting something? And then there's another case they just accepted. It's also from Colorado, and it's about a Catholic school that's trying to participate in a universal pre-K program from the state. They're trying to get a carve out where they basically don't allow people to come to the school if they disagree with their beliefs on sexuality and gender. But Colorado is saying that that violates their anti-discrimination law. And so there's a question of whether or not Colorado is treating this religious school the same as other schools within the state.
You know, I always get a crack up because there was a case, I believe it was in Pennsylvania, where it was a Catholic university, and a bunch of Muslims went to the university and objected to the crucifixes and other religious symbols hanging in the corridors. Hello, called a Catholic university for a reason. But then you look at the First Amendment and says government cannot, Congress cannot create a religion, nor prohibit the free expression thereof. We went after a local judge one day because a woman was found not guilty on whatever it was, and she says, "Oh, thank God," and the judge lectured her about a separation of church and state. But that's not in our Constitution or anything. Never, ever. Matter of fact, Thomas Jefferson was specific when he wrote to the preachers, I believe in Connecticut, stating it does not exist.
Yeah, and states were able to have like an established religion. The idea of, I think that the First Amendment at that time was that the federal government wouldn't interfere with what states wanted to do in terms of the establishment of religion, not that the federal government couldn't have some kind of entanglement or some kind of involvement with it. And that's really the issue, because the Supreme Court has said, this was, I think, decades ago, the Supreme Court had this thing called the Lemon Test, which basically said there were, I think, 3 different ways in which you could determine whether or not something had, a law had violated the Establishment Clause. And that, one of them was this excessive entanglement between the government and religion. But the Supreme Court has since overruled that particular precedent. And so the 10 Commandments case is interesting because in 1980, like I said, they got rid of that. The Supreme Court said that Kentucky law violated the the Establishment Clause, but they did so based on that old precedent that the Supreme Court has since overruled. And so I think that the Supreme Court is going to, take this again and just kind of like reaffirm we're getting rid of this way of looking at the Establishment Clause.
One more thing before we go. This is a hot topic, redistricting. And
yes,
we're coming up with the census in the near future, and we're going to start redistricting all over again. And I remember our fight here. Matter of fact, I sent a video up with my comments about the first district here, which is Nancy Mesa seat. At that time, they were trying to gerrymander it. And my video went a little bit viral, and some people used it. But here again, they're trying again to use race as a reason for redistricting. But that's again in violation of the 14th Amendment, isn't it, with the Equal Protection Clause?
Yeah, so this was like a kind of a pretty complicated decision. But that's kind of the general thrust of what the Supreme Court was saying, is that you can't have race as like the primary factor for why you're redistricting these different places, or these different districts for the in the congressional map. And this is the latest of many redistricting cases they've had. This is like a really complicated area of law. And so Supreme Court has had multiple cases, even on the emergency docket, like after the decision in Calais, they had a bunch of cases come up because, when we have midterms coming up and there's the 2028 elections. But so, yeah, I mean, that was basically, I think, the general thrust of what the Supreme Court said in this Louisiana case. So yeah, it seems like it's going to be, and of course, the dissent was saying this is going to lead to underrepresentation of minorities, and because I think that the way the Supreme Court ruled is pretty different than how courts have ruled in the past on this issue. But this is, again, like another example of the Roberts Court, and particularly after Trump added justices, just really changing the game on so many issues. We didn't even talk about gun rights, but yeah, like the gun decision in Hawaii, and other decisions as well.
They keep your hands off my AK-47.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, they just decided to take up an assault weapons ban, which is really interesting for next term. So,
I mean, the attempt at gun control, you can't control a gun. If you put it down on a table and you walk away, half an hour later, it does not get up and go and shoot someone. It takes a person to pick it up. So you actually need to control the action of the person to make sure it's within the confines of the law, not the weapon itself. So they're coming up with all these things like the return and the chamber, and all these other things they've got to try to control. You can't even assemble a gun without breaking the law.
Yeah. They've had those cases about like bump stocks and ghost guns. But the big decision really that kind of changed the game, I think, was this decision called it was the New York State Rifle Association v. Bruin. And it's just, it's this idea that any kind of gun regulation has to be consistent with the nation's history and tradition. So what, the types of laws that were implemented early in the country's history, because those are kind of indicators of what the founding meant when they had the Second Amendment. So that was a big case. And since then, there's like courts have been trying to wrestle with this. And so the Supreme Court has taken up some of these cases for oral argument. And like you were saying, I think that they've tried to focus more on the, not so much the device, but the person, because they have these cases where they're looking at, for example, whether or not the federal government can prevent a domestic abuser from owning a gun. And they have another case about just recently about whether or not someone who does drugs can own a gun. And so they're developing this view that if you're sufficiently dangerous as an individual, then there can be restrictions on the type of firearm that you're going to do if you have firearms, and the government can step in that sense. But yeah, they're still pretty like with this Hawaii decision, the Walford decision, they're still being pretty defensive in terms of trying to maintain normal, like a wide access to firearms and people being able to carry them.
Well, Sam, it's been so fun. I mean, we were only going to be here for 30 minutes. We went way over it, and we could keep on going for another hour easily. Yes. But Sam, God bless you for the hard work you do over the Epoch Times, keeping us informed and explaining it so well so the average person can understand what the heck is going on in D.C. So people can find it at the Epoch Times, or as I say, the Epic Times. Yes. And we're going to have you back and have Hannah with us next time.
Sounds good. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Have a good one. See you.
Okay. Okay, and we are live. So welcome here to Southern Sense. I'm your hostess, Annie Ubelis, and I'm going to mess up your last name, so please.
That's okay. Liath Higazin.
Higazin. All right, and you started just a couple of years ago, Revelation Gold Group, with another gentleman. And the name is unusual unless you're someone of faith, you would understand why. But why don't you tell the audience, why did you choose that name?
So we chose Revelation Gold Group. Revelation comes from a book in the Bible, one of the last books in the Bible. And the reason we chose it was because we are a faith-based Christian conservative company. Everybody that we hire at the company shares our Christian values of really trying to help our fellow man, biblical stewardship, being honest and transparent and as supportive as possible when it comes to helping everyday Americans access gold and silver investing as a part of their portfolio. So those faith-based principles are important to us. We embody them. Myself and our co-founder is also a Christian, and so are most folks here. So just really important for us. And we chose that name because we want to be unbashful and and we want to put it out there. We're not embarrassed to show that we are a faith-based company. And a lot of people, they love that. They work with us because of that precisely. We're not the largest company on earth. We may not even have the smartest people or the most brilliant minds. I'm going to be humble, but I know that we have God-honoring people here, and a lot of people, they come and they want to work with us because of that and because of the experience that they get. But our people are pretty smart and pretty great as well. So.
I gotta say, this I do find amazing because you have an 800 number, and I was trying to call you earlier today, so I picked up the phone number and I just dialed it, and I said, okay, now I'm getting into this whole big thing. You're gonna go press 1 for this. Now, why do I have to press 1 for English type of thing? So I hung up, and I didn't leave a message or anything. I didn't wait on the line. And the next thing I know, a few moments later, your company is calling me back and you tried to call it. You don't find that in companies today.
No, we really do care. We'll call you back as soon as just a few minutes, as you got to experience it firsthand. We do our best. We do our best.
Well, now you handle IRAs, but you also do other stuff too. And we're going to get into that. But one of the things I want to point out, in Revelations being the last book in the Bible, it deals with us heading into the end of time. And when you look at today, all the craziness that's going on around us, the rise of AI and all these other weird things going on, a lot of people are not so much losing faith, but feel like we are coming into the end of time. And if they actually read all the way through, at the very end, we win.
Yes, that's correct. We get to, at the end of the book, we get to essentially all the believers, they get to go in and be with Jesus Christ and God and everybody else that we've loved in life who are also believers. And you're exactly right. It does feel like we are in the end times. And I've mentioned that before, and that it's fitting for our company name, Revelation Gold Group, because they describe the end times in that book. It does feel like we are in the end times. It seems like even just basic things like a family being able to afford groceries seems to be such an impossible mission. And you've got the wife and the husband working, and the kids are having to do without certain things just to put food on the table. And that seems very end times to me. It's hard to get a job. Things like AI are, I saw the other day, my mother was actually almost scammed by AI. She gets a phone call or an email and you can't tell if it's a real person or not. And it sounds like somebody that you know. I mean, we're fighting a hard life. It almost feels like we're fighting demons at sometimes. So.
Yeah, it is an amazing time that we're in. And I can remember at one point we had a gold standard. Our money was backed by gold and silver. And for over 100 years, up until the 1960s, a quarter was worth a quarter. You got the same amount of goods for $1 as you did 100 years before. But once we've taken off the gold standard, and I say this all the time, thank you, Richard Nixon, then that's when we saw our money losing value. I mean, growing up as a kid, I remember going into the grocery store and you could buy a whole chicken for 19 cents a pound.
Wow.
And you're now looking at $6 or more a pound. And that's in just my short lifetime. But we lost that standard, so our money is losing value. You can put it in the bank, but come 10, 20 years from now, it doesn't have an appreciation value of any significance that you can retire on.
No, I couldn't agree more with you. And in 1971, I believe, was the year that Richard Nixon took us off the gold standard. And from there, our fiat became just a floating fiat currency, just going through the wind. It was no longer backed by anything. We saw rampant inflation after that, similar to what we've seen here recently. But Annie, there's hope. I think there is. I think let me just share a bit of a story. If you look at what the central banks have been doing the last few years, they've been the largest buyers of gold. In fact, earlier this year, central bank reserves in gold have surpassed U.S. Treasuries for the first time in a very long time. Meaning they have more gold than they do U.S. Treasuries. They're putting their faith and their trust in gold than they are in these dollars that are losing their value. And I find that really interesting because it's almost like they are seeing something coming. They're seeing maybe the price of gold continuing to go up, or just something really bad happening to the US Treasuries or to the dollar. And they're backing themselves up with an insurance policy, essentially, having gold. And I think that's really interesting to see, because even with the pullback in prices for precious metals this year, they are still continuing to buy at record paces. And I think that that's something that's really important for everybody to watch. They're essentially building their own personal gold-backed insurance policy. And I really think Americans in the way, and that's what we help people do. We help people buy and invest in precious metals. You can buy it physically with cash and hold it in your own home, or you could even do it with your eligible retirement funds. So you can, in fact, sort of recreate those pre-1971 gold-backed standards for yourself by purchasing precious metals. So that's what we help people do, and that's what we encourage them and help educate them.
Yeah, because I remember when Richard Nixon did that. That's how old I am. But a friend of my mother's said, buy gold now. And that was in the 1970s. And at that point, it was climbing up towards $300 an ounce. What's the price for gold today?
The price for gold today is just above $4,000 an ounce, and silver is right around $60 an ounce.
Wow. Yeah. It has appreciated a lot. And this is one thing that you do. It's like, here you are, you're young, you're watching the economy go to hell in a handbasket. All the turmoil in the world, and you go, well, how am I going to end up having something for my retirement? Outside of looking for Uncle Sam to give you your Social Security check and all the other benefits, that may not be around in the future. So what do they do? And that's where you came in with the idea, and your partner. Tell us about your partner.
Tell us about what? I'm sorry, Ann. What was the question?
Your partner in crime with at Revolution.
My partner, he's phenomenal. His name is Mark Johnson. In fact, we go as far back as college together, so we've known each other for quite a bit. He's phenomenal. He's one of the most dependable and reliable and resourceful people I have come to know in my life. He's always there and has got your back no matter what, and he treats this company and our clients the same way. It's not one-sided or exclusive to just a friendship, but he really brings that to work every single day. And he actually started from the bottom in this industry. He joined precious metals, got into it right after college, and he learned so much, and he saw what a lot of companies were doing that he didn't like. It didn't sit well with him. There are some bad apples in our industry, and he didn't want to partake in high pressure sales or putting people in high premium items or not really being transparent and honest. And he reached out to me one day and he said, Liath, I was working in corporate America, just helping build companies for other folks. And he said, I think we could do this better, and we could do it in a way that, is a God honoring way. And that's Mark for you.
Yeah. Well, I got to say, when I did call, it was Mark himself that called me back. He didn't know all he knew, he saw a phone number, and he said, well, this person's reaching out. Let me reach out. I found phenomenal. Even when we had the problem with which link I sent you. I sent you the wrong link originally. And I called up and I said, no, I got it. He's got it. Don't worry about it. And I think that's what you were bringing to your clients. Because if he does this to me and I'm just nobody, he doesn't even know my name much or if anything, And you go back so swiftly. And that means you really do care about the people that come to you.
That sounds like him. And we often speak to clients ourselves. If our line is too busy when somebody's calling in, we have it so that it routes to Mark and my phone number as well. We really want somebody to pick up the phone, even if it's us, even if we're busy. Clients are really important to us. You're really important to us. Annie, I'm sure he knew who you were. And I know you've been working closely with another phenomenal individual here. Her name is Gabriella, but she has been just out of office for a few days, so we're filling in. So you
Not allowed a day off. No, she can't have that.
Well, she's putting Mark to good use, is what it sounds like. So I'm glad he got to reach back out to you and show you how we treat everybody.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, the first time I ever spoke to her was when she invited me to what you're doing here.
Mm-hmm.
As I'm talking to her, I'm going through a bunch of my pets going to the vet. And I actually sold her on the insurance company I use for my pet.
She loves her dogs, that's for sure. Did she show you a picture of them?
No, she didn't. No.
Okay, she loves her dogs. I'm sure she took it to heart.
Yeah. People say, well, why gold?
Mm-hmm.
But that again goes back to the Bible. And you can look at the three wise men. You can look throughout the Bible. Gold has a place in it. But how do you make faith with money? And they said, no, money is evil. Money is the cause of all evil in the world. Not necessarily, because again, in the Bible, it gives you parables that Christ would say about how the lazy person versus the one that is diligent and faithful. So that is what your company is based upon, listening to the teachings in the parables by Christ, saying that, no, it's okay to have money. It's what you do is what makes it good or bad.
Mm-hmm. And being responsible with it and good stewards of it. There's a lot of people in the world and don't have anything. And then there's some of us who are extremely fortunate, even though sometimes we may not think it. But, what we do have in our bank accounts, and if we have a home that we can afford and a car in the driveway, I mean, we are blessed beyond measure. And I think we ought to be good stewards of all of that. And I think, when people consider precious metals as part of that stewardship, it just makes sense. I mean, gold has been mentioned, don't quote me, but at least 100 times in the Bible, if not a few hundred times. It's been a currency that everybody has seen as a symbol of wealth and has been able to store their wealth in for thousands upon thousands of years, all the way as far back as the pharaohs of Egypt, and probably even before that, in civilizations we may not even know about anymore. So it's a timeless place of wealth, and gold is worth an ounce of gold, whether you're in Russia or America or in South Africa or Australia, and it's always going to keep its wealth, unlike what a paper currency might do.
Well, one of the things you do, because you don't just do gold, you do silver, platinum, and palladium was the other one.
That's correct.
And there's a difference with what you're doing, because you can put your money in the bank, but your money is tracked through different services. It's tracked electronically.
Mm-hmm.
I've had it happen that I went to buy ammunition one day, and I actually had gone to a pawn shop because he had a sideline of selling ammunition. And no sooner did I leave the front door of his shop and get to my car, I get a notice from the credit card company that my account had been put suspended. And I'm calling them, what? Because
no kidding.
I actually bought something from someone who sells ammunition and guns.
Oh.
So and we're hearing now that they're trying to pass legislation and things that you can't go after a person because of their beliefs. You can't bring their but we're seeing that this has been done in various large banks. Now, you're saying that if you do what we're offering you, you've got a physical item that they can't take away from you.
That's exactly right, Anne. It's a physical, tangible item. No banks can freeze it. The government can't freeze it. Your neighbor can't freeze it. Nobody can freeze it. It's yours. It's worth something. You can hold it in your hand. You can take a bar of gold and and go buy a car with it. Tell your neighbor, hey, I'll buy that car off you. It's worth something. If our currency collapsed, it's worth something. You can still use it to go buy a car or barter for eggs or groceries. You're exactly right, Ann. And that's not just something that I think legislation is pushing to have more control over us on a personal level, which is very scary, by the way. It sounds like a very dystopian future. But if you take a look at what we've done on a global scale, it's already happening. And I think the reason why precious metals have gone up so much in price and in value and there's so much demand for it is because in 2022, when Russia invaded Ukraine, Washington froze hundreds of billions of dollars worth of their US treasuries just overnight. That money was gone. And what did every finance minister in every country on earth look at that and say and do? They said, we can't have that happen to our country. Like, we need to not be so dependent on this fiat currency that could just be frozen by the whims of someone overseas. So they all started buying, their banks started buying gold at just record numbers. They've been the largest buyers over the last few years. So they've gone after ownership and control and safety and security, and they've done it for themselves. Countries like China, Poland, Turkey, those are some of the biggest buyers of gold. And if they're doing it, and that's the smartest money and the smartest minds on the planet, if they're doing it, they're getting out of the dollar and getting into gold. And I really think we ought to all consider it ourselves as well.
Well, the United States, its dollar has been the global standard for money. And you see now everyone's shuffling around saying, no, it's going to be the yen or it's going to be something else. They're trying to take that away from us where we have the ability to control a lot of what is going on. Now, this is where, again, you come into play because now you've got something physical. And when people do buy into this, if they want to actually hold the stuff at home or wherever, they can physically do that. They don't have to worry about you saying, oh, yeah, you own 10 bars of this or 10 bars of that. They can actually hold it if they want. Otherwise, as I understand, you would put it in a depository for them that they have access to anytime they want. They can actually go to it if they want to go to that depository and physically look at what they have.
That's exactly correct. If they don't want to, or they have to store it in a depository, we'll help them set that up. We'll pay for the first year's fees, in fact, to get them set up in a situation like that. There are a few depositories around the country that we like and we use. There's a depository in Delaware, and my favorite one is the Texas depository down here in Shiner, Texas, not too far away from Dallas. And you are exactly right, Ann. It's not like a over-leveraged group of metals. It's not, your metals aren't mixed in with anybody else's. It's segregated storage. Your metals are there. They're tied to your name, and nobody can take that away from you. Those are your metals, and you can go and visit them and take a look at them. And these places are guarded by dogs, by security cameras, by lasers, by armed security officers. So it's like your own personal Fort Knox.
Well, we don't even know what's left in Fort Knox.
We don't know.
Now, most of what you do is with IRA. And a lot of people don't understand. As a matter of fact, I get confused very easily. It doesn't take a lot to confuse me. But an IRA is an individual retirement account that someone can start to tap into after they reach a certain age, at which point they're not taxed as it's going in, but the taxes when it comes back out. What does someone say, for example, you're now over 60 or your retirement age, is it wise still to use an IRA for someone that's older?
So, and the way it works is most people have an IRA or a 401k. Maybe they contributed from their employer their entire lives, and those accounts are great. Everybody in America pretty much has an account like that, and they do their job. However, our traditional retirement accounts that we have with Fidelity or Goldman Sachs or Ameritrade or any of these big companies, they're limited in the type of asset classes that you can have in them. It's really mostly securities, mutual funds, like stocks. for the most part. What we do is we help you open what we call a self-directed IRA, but we've coined the term gold IRA. And what a self-directed IRA is, Anne, is it's an account type that lets you have almost up to 200 different asset classes, from land rights to collectible items to your home to physical precious metals. You can't put physical precious metals in most of your current retirement accounts. So that's what we help people do. We find out if their current retirement account is eligible for a rollover or a transfer. These transfers and rollovers are, for the most part, penalty-free and tax-deferred. So you keep all the advantages that you like in your current account. We help you with opening your new account. It takes less than 10 minutes. It's fairly simple to say, hey, I want to transfer $100,000. We help you transfer that over to your new gold IRA. And then you pick and you choose your metals. But you get a lot more flexibility and ownership with the gold IRA. It's managed by yourself. It's not managed by a broker who takes a percentage every year. So the fees are extremely low. And it's just a safe place to buy your metals, park it, and forget about it.
Now, if there's someone that is a senior citizen, like myself, is it still wise to do an IRA if you don't have one?
A self-directed IRA?
Yeah.
A lot of people, and what's great about your self-directed IRA or gold IRA is that you can fund it with money that you've saved up your entire life in your IRA. Gold costs about $4,000 an ounce. So if you weren't contributing for most of your working career, you've probably not got a ton of money in a retirement account to transfer it over. And I'm not sure exactly how it works. If you can open a retirement account and add a bunch of cash to it, you'd have to speak to a tax advisor on how that works. But the idea is, if you have cash on hand or savings, maybe in your couch, in your cushion, or in the bank, or in a chest in the ground outside, you can call us, and what you could do is just a direct purchase. You don't need to do it through a gold IRA or through a previous IRA that you have. You can just say, hey, I've got 20 grand sitting in a safe. I'd like to swap that out for gold and have gold in my safe instead. And you can purchase with cash and store it at home. So that's what I think you should do if you've got cash, is just get that route.
So you're not just offering IRAs, you're also offering alternatives to an IRA.
Yes.
Which is, it's funny because I told Gabriella I've got a box full of silver and I have no idea what's in there. So I have to do an inventory on that.
Okay.
It was only $18 an ounce.
Wow. Well, we can get that appraised for you, Ann, and let you know exactly what you've got.
You also partner with a bunch of different organizations and charities and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That is where your Christianity faith comes into place. But you're not there to make money. You're also there to help other organizations and people.
We do, Ann. We donate a portion of our profits to certain organizations. You can see them on our website. Some notable names are the Samaritan's Purse, American Red Cross. There's a few veteran organizations that we donate to. We actually have somebody here. We've had a few people here at the company who have been veterans. And we started looking at veterans organizations just to honor them. It's something they're passionate about. But we do. It's not entirely about profits. Everybody is, we all have to make money and pay our bills and take care of our families. But as much as we can, when God gives us extra, we're happy to give some of it back. And I think it's really important.
There's so much to go into this. I've got notes. I hand scribble my notes, so sometimes I have to go, what the heck did I just write there?
It's okay. I do the same.
You've got great stuff. If people want to go, they can go onto your website, which is revelationsgoldgroup.com. Not Revelations. I keep on putting the S in there. All right. But you had some acronyms in there that I'm not exactly sure what they stand for. One of them is
Sure.
RMD.
It's what? I'm sorry, Ann.
RMD.
RMD. An RMD is a required minimum distribution. So when you have a retirement account, you've put money in it your whole entire life. At a certain point, Uncle Sam is going to require you to pull some of that money out so that he can get his portion of his taxes on that, because that's when you have to pay your taxes, is on the distribution. So that's what an RMD is. It's a required minimum distribution. I think it kicks in at a certain age, I think 67, 68. Again, ask your tax advisor about RMDs. Don't take what I'm saying here as bulletproof advice, but that's what an RMD is, and you have to start taking them at a certain age. And you can take your RMDs in precious metals. So a lot of our clients will call every year and say, hey, I have to take my required minimum distribution, and we'll send a few gold coins to their home from their account.
Now, when again, you're going to say talk to your tax people, but people are then concerned about how much taxes pay on that physical gold. I was reading somewhere in here that they basically on what your purchase price was, and at that point, they're not going to face as heavy a tax load than if they took cash, correct?
So, it's a bit of a technicality, but if they take cash is $100,000. You know what $100,000 is. Metals are a bit different in that somebody might pay $4,200 for an ounce of gold, or $4,400 for an ounce of gold, depending on the different type of metal they buy. Let's say it's a bar versus a coin. But inside of your retirement account, your portfolio account size is reported at melt value, which is the spot ticker price that you'll see when you look up metals online. So sometimes you can take advantage of a difference in values depending on what products you buy, and you might get a bit of a lighter tax load. It's not guaranteed, but there is a bit of wiggle room there based on the different types of metals and how they value your metals.
Okay. If people do go onto your website, they get a ton of information and brochures that you'll be happy to send that basically explains what all of this is. And what I like about your company is if you're someone that an IRA is not fitted for, you can actually then buy the actual metals themselves. And as you say, your depository or in your own, underneath your own mattress, whatever you want to do with it.
That's true.
But you also have certain requirements on the quality of the metal. Gold, I think, is 99.6, and everything else is basically 99.95% purity. You know the quality you're getting is not going to be the same as if you turned around into, a lot of these companies sell coins and gold, but plated or something like that doesn't have the same value. You are saying this is going to have a definite value on it.
We do, and we actually, it's 4 nines. That's what we say, meaning 99.99. So it's actually only one small hair away from 100%, but that's the standard of metals that we purchase. They have to be IRA eligible, and in order for the metals to be IRA eligible, they need to be 99.99% gold. And if you are buying metals from any other shop or a gold shop or even a pawn shop, and you see that the metals aren't exactly that, I would definitely press on the brakes and rethink what you're about to buy.
It's not only that, gold is something that you can physically hand over, in your will or to your kids. You can physically hand it over to someone. So they're not worried about, well, it's inside this account or that account, and then we'll put these hoops and everything. And before you take anything out, talk to your tax accountant. You can actually physically pick it up and say, hey, graduation gift, here's a bar of gold. I wish.
I had a client not too long ago. Oh boy, it's actually July, so it has been a while. But for Christmas, he put gold coins in his grandchildren's stocking stuffers. he figured I'd rather give them something that is worth something than just a video game or some sort of toy. So I thought that was a great idea.
The information that's on your website, and I was punching it out all yesterday, going through everything you do, but it really explains everything you do in exact detail, so there's no questions about it. Because you have here this plain English guide to precious metals. So you walk people through step by step. It's not as if, yeah, well, you saw the commercial on TV, send me $1,000 and, we'll get you started. You actually walk people through and help them understand exactly what they are doing.
That's exactly right. We hold your hand through the entire process. We help you with all the paperwork that's involved. But again, our promise is that takes less than 10 minutes because that's the boring part. Nobody likes to do that part, but less than 10 minutes, we're doing it. We're holding your hand. We help you transfer the funds that you're looking to spend on precious metals. Again, we walk you through it, make it very super simple and easy. And lastly, when it comes time to pick your metals, we lay them all out on the table. We don't push you in one direction or pressure you or try and get you to just only buy silver and hide a huge markup in silver because that's what some gold companies do. We lay it all out on the table from the most generic bullion products up to the more premium limited vintage coins. And we walk you through what each of those entail, and you get to pick and choose. The last thing I want, Anne, is for somebody to call me back a month or two later and they go, Liath, I actually don't know what you sold us. Like, what did you make me buy? What did I buy it for? Or why did I pick this? And oh, you actually ripped me off. I don't want that to ever be the case. So being very transparent and education first is really important to us. We want to make sure everybody knows what they're buying and what they're getting, and that they get to confidently make that choice themselves. And we walk them through the administration side of it, paperwork and things like that.
Well, now people say, well, investing in gold or IRAs, you got to put a huge chunk of money down. But that's not, again, how your company works. If you have a little guy who only has a fistful of dollars going, well, how do I even start? I don't have $10,000. I don't even have $5,000 to bet, but you can walk them through it and help them their wealth. The little tiny guy is just as important to you as the rich fat cat.
No, that's exactly correct. We have people that spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on precious metals, and we have people where they've got $10,000 and that's the world to them, and we treat it like it's our world as well. Like, as much as that means to them, it means to us as well. And we roll out the same red carpet treatment for the guy spending $10,000 or the lady spending $500,000. We again walk them through all the same steps, make everything super simple and easy, and help them choose the metals that make sense for them. Again, and our mission is we want precious metals to be accessible to all hardworking Americans. We don't want this to be a process that's scary or confusing or leaves you kind of wondering, well, what did I just finish doing or get out of this? We really want this to be accessible. I think precious metals are a great way to diversify your portfolio. I own some, my parents own some. I don't stop talking about it. My friends and family, they all own some at this point. And I really think all Americans should be able to get into precious metals if that's something that they want.
Yeah, and reading your bio and everything, I was kind of like cracking up because I'm half Italian and half German. And being raised Italian Roman Catholic, mom always dragged you to church. But you actually going to church with your mom. You have those basic family values that are so important and we're seeing lost in today's society. And I found that so heartwarming that you value family as much as what you're doing.
Of course. We live it, not just preach it. Growing up, my mom did drag us to church. And, when you're a kid, you don't sometimes want to go, but she made us go. And by the time you really understand how important it is and it's meaningful to you, growing up, we were in church 3 times a week. We had our Sunday service. We had our midweek youth group service on Wednesdays. I remember my pastor comes up and he says, Liath, we can't afford a janitor to help clean around the church. And he goes, so we get volunteers. And he goes, I need you to come vacuum the church every Monday and Wednesday, or it was Tuesday or Thursday. I'm like, the whole church? And I'm like, 15 years old. He goes, yeah, the whole church. What's wrong with that? You're strong and, God's given you arms and legs. So we did everything in church. I loved it. It was one of my favorite parts of growing up. And I used to go with my mom, and I still do when I get to be near her. When you grow up and you move away a little bit, it becomes hard to go every Sunday with your mom, but whenever I can, I do go.
Oh, you're going to make a good husband one day.
Yes, that's exactly right. Thank you so much.
Well, we got just a couple of minutes left, but I wanted to follow up because I just lost my train of thought.
Mm-hmm.
In your bio, you said you've been to 27 of the states?
I have. I love to, growing up, I had a Jeep. I had one of those, banged up cool Jeeps that you can take on a road trip with your friends. And I sure put it to use. Me and my friends, we would just get in the car and like, we're going to New Orleans this weekend. And we'd do things like that. Or we're going to this national park. Our favorite thing was going to national parks, to be honest with you. We loved to hike. And not just any hike. We'd be like, give me the 20-mile hike up a mountain. And so I do love to explore. I think America is so beautiful. I mean, people like to go to Europe and Asia and all these places. And I'm just like, I'm sure it's great there too. I've been to a few places, but there's nothing like home. I mean, we have all the climates, all the geographies. We have mountains, beaches, deserts, forests. I think even some parts of Washington count as like a rainforest even, which is really cool. And we've got tropical Florida and we've got it all. The fall seasons, everything is so beautiful. So I do love to get around and visit as many places as I can. And there's no better way to do it than with friends or family or loved ones. So that is a hobby of mine.
Well, I remember right after I graduated from college, which I worked 3 jobs myself to put myself through.
Wow.
I had owned a travel agent. And you were
No
even
kidding.
parents' eyes back then. I saw that you said 27. I actually pulled the map up and I started counting. I made it up. Oh, wait a minute. Hawaii makes it 24. Forgot about Hawaii.
Wow. We're almost even.
Yeah. But I have a lot more time on than you have.
I have not been to Hawaii though. I need to go there. We can have that count as 3 or 4 states for you, and then we could be even. Because I'm sure it's beautiful.
All right, well, people can find you by going to revelationgoldgroup.com. And as I said, you guys pick up the phone right away. You don't need to on hold. If you don't want to sit, you end up calling us back, which I found absolutely amazing. I actually had a politician do that to me once. I called
Really?
and I got through to his answering thing, and I just, the heck with it. I hung up. I didn't have any patience. Later, the senator turns around, personally calls me back, not his staff. But that's what people could expect also from you, that type of attitude to your customers. And
I think it's the most important thing. We want to take care of our clients. It's servant leadership is really what that is. If you look at the story of Jesus Christ, I mean, he was the Son of God. He could have, had all the gold and all the most amazing, comfortable life possible. What did he do? He rode a donkey and he went around serving people. Essentially, a smelly mule, or he'd walk, and we try to live our lives that way as well when we can. You'll hear from myself or from Mark all the time. If you want to call in to 888-465-3049, and if you can ask for Liath or for Mark, and you can skip everybody else if you'd like, and you can talk directly with us. I'd be more than happy to talk to anybody. That's 888-465-3049. Ask for Mark or ask for Liath, and we'll talk to you ourselves.
As in faith, Liath.
Yes. I do. I tell people my name is like Faith, but with an L.
All right. Well, Liath, it has been a pleasure, and we welcome you back in the future. I normally have a co-host with me, but because of this weekend and my mom's birthday on the 4th of July, a little hectic. So.
Oh, no kidding. My birthday is next week. I'm not more than a few days away from your mom.
birthday on the 8th.
Thank you. Yes, on the 8th. How did you know that?
Hey, I'm a retired cop.
That is amazing. You just blew my mind. Well, happy birthday to your mom. Thanks for having me. I would be more than happy to come back. This was an absolute joy and a pleasure.
All right, and so the listeners know and watchers know, my mom has seen more than 1/3 of this nation's history. She'll turn 94.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
beautiful. You should ask her about maybe what the price of gold was when she was a kid. I'm sure.
We are confiscating gold and silver to pay.
Yeah. She probably remembers the confiscation. Wow. Well, she's had a long and beautiful life.
Yeah. Well, and you have a blessed day. It was a pleasure talking to you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. God bless as well. Talk soon. Bye-bye.
I'm praying for this land I love, America, America, the home of the free. But there are people making plans to change America. They've no respect for her or what matters most to me. That's why I stand for the flag and I kneel at the cross. Long for the friends I have loved and lost. And I still believe in God we trust, and the freedom our forefathers granted us. I hope it's not too late to save America. Do you hear our battle cry across America? We've got to rescue her. You know it's up to me and you to see the truth behind their lies. Don't change America. God bless America and the red, white, and blue. That's why I stand for the flag and I kneel at the cross. Long for the friends I have loved and lost. And I still believe in God we trust, and the freedom our forefathers granted us. I hope it's not too late to save America. For the friends we have loved and lost, and we still believe in God we trust, in the freedom our forefathers granted us. We know it's not too late to save America. Save America. Let's save America. Together we can save America.